Hello, everybody. My name is Keith Salmon, and I am the CEO of Keith Salmon Coaching. And I am also the host of this show right here that you're watching. It is called the Million Dollar Story Series. And I am really honored to have Kinia Romanowska on this morning. And I know that she's in Mountain Time, but I'm not sure exactly where she is joining us from. Why don't you tell us? And good morning.
Good morning, Keith. Thank you so much for having me and for hosting these stories. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I'm in Edmonton and it is still a little bit dark outside. So it's 8 a.m. and the sun hasn't quite peeked through the clouds or the snow.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm in Santa Monica, California. It's not quite sunny out, and it is, I'm just going to double check a little something technical here real quick. I'm sure that we're all good, but it's always good for me to do this right this second, and we're good. And so, yeah, this I think it's a fascinating thing. I always kind of start with this a little bit when we get going, is the far-reaching international, worldwide reach that we have on a simple format like this is quite extraordinary. And the idea that we can be connected to people in all parts of the world, I still can't get over it. To me, it's our version of this generation's moon landing, if you will, the idea that we're connected in such a way. So Edmonton, and I'm going to make my friends and family back in the Midwest mad when I say it's like 50 something degrees here and it's freezing over here in Santa Monica. So that's just one of those things. A little about a show before we get going here is that I believe that the reason that I do the show is that it's a synchronicity experiment. It's an experiment of story. I'm a story person. I've been a story person my whole career in other mediums, film and advertising mostly. And basically what happens here is that we all have stories. It's called the Million Dollar Story Series because we all have $1 million stories. The story from right in here that motivates you, it takes you out into the world and does what you do, helps you do and what you do. And so if you're ready to receive that story from a guest or from me or from you inside at the right time, the synchronicity triangle here could be a conversation that could in fact change your life. So welcome aboard and just be open to receive that message. And Kinia has a great story. So what I'd like to do is I'd like you to tell us a little bit about you're the CEO of Pros and Babes. It's a great company that and movement basically that helps people and parents, especially mothers, I would say, and you of course could correct me, get their careers going and understand that they have a right to have a career even when they're building their family. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Pros and Babes to get us rolling here?
I wonder where I should start because you were telling me about discussing that story and I first had an idea of what I wanted to say about it, but I realized that it started so much longer ago than where I actually thought it started. So I usually say that Pros and Babes started when somebody in my family said that I would miss intellectual conversations when I was on maternity leave. And that hit hard. I realized that I was always very intellectually engaged in my job, whether the job was easy or hard, whatever challenges there were in my corporate job. I loved the interactions. I loved doing something with my brain, the connections. And I thought, yeah, if I'm going to be home with my child for a year and completely be cut off from that, my brain might get a little bit fuzzy. So I've heard of the term mommy brain. So it was, I was pregnant and I thought, Pros and Babes, like I'm going to reserve that domain, and I reserved it. I was starting a new corporate job and I didn't know what would turn out of that. And I gave birth, and then 4 months later, I was a new mom. It was 4 a.m. I wasn't sleeping. My son was sleeping. It was like a really weird thing because usually it was the reverse, right?
Right.
And so I was jet lagged coming back to visit my family in Europe. I really, really wanted my grandparents in Europe in Poland to know my son and for him to be connected to his heritage. And I'm so glad I did because then, my family started passing away. And so I was jet lagged and I was just feeling so tired. And I thought it would be really good to connect with other moms, and the Pros and Babes, bell rang, and I put something together on Eventbrite and this little curriculum of 8 weeks where I could bring together moms to talk about career and family, not just poo, not just pee and spit up and being a mom, which is wonderful, but also using our brains. And so we that first group, it was really spontaneous. I sent things out to a mailing list, and we showed up in a coffee shop with our squirming babies, and we started talking. And something was born there. I realized that it hit a nerve. And, once that first group was over, the moms asked me, well, what's next, Kinia? What's next, Kinia? And so it was a series of what's next, where I kept on growing those mom groups. And then working moms would reach out to me saying, I need help. Do you have anything? So I'm like, okay, let's do something for you. And then dads, I'd hear, well, what's for dads? I'm like, okay, let's put together hops and pops. And so
Hops and pops. Huh?
Hops and pops. Yeah,
That's awesome.
Dads together for baby friendly pub nights or hikes and things like that. And the story grew to where it is today. Essentially, I never knew that I'd be here, and I'd call myself a CEO of something with a team working with me with building a program now called the Mom BA. That is a longer term program where moms can really come in, because the maternity leave is 12 months. And so that's a good also period where you feel chaotic and lost. You can enter the structure that will support you. And now 3 years later, it grew into something a lot more structured where people can access it from all over Canada. So it started, and I think it started truly when I'd say I met my husband, who is my soulmate. I met him in the mountains here in Alberta, because I'm not from here originally. And I met Pavo, and I think maybe Pros and Babes, the seed of that was planted when I met him, because meeting my husband has also been very transformational for me in terms of my values and what I think is important. I used to travel all over the world. Keith, just like you, I was kind of in a career that was in communication and journalism and filmmaking to some regards. And I thought that was really important to me in my 20s. But when I met my husband, that started planting the seed of what is happening today, really, with Pros and Babes.
Right. Well, that's an amazing journey, and the idea that you reserve that domain so futuristically thinking, that was pretty awesome. I think you're really onto something, because there's a lot of what I do is I help people with my experience, so I can maybe save them a little trouble by sharing my experience. Because that career thing, you have a choice. There's one of these, if you call it a hero's journey, you could go the wrong way sometimes, and I think that where a lot of our success is generated from a drive that is not easy to harness sometimes. And you look in your future and you look, well, it's almost like a habit. It becomes an addiction to that success, because you don't believe that you're getting older, or you don't believe that life is passing you by, and so you're catching them before it's too late, before you sort of abandon some of the values that you might have. I think you really doing a great service for those people, those moms and dads. That's awesome that you include the dads. That's because it's both sides. It's both sides. You can really miss a lot. So how would it work? Would you mind telling us where you're from in Europe? Is that part of
Sure.
the?
So
Yeah.
I was born in Poland.
Mm-hmm.
My parents left in '87 after the Chernobyl incident. My dad was a journalist there, and there was misinformation, and so people did not find out that their health was at risk with the nuclear cloud. So for those who don't know, the Chernobyl explosion is when a nuclear power plant exploded in Chernobyl in Ukraine, and there were radiation clouds that went over Europe. And so my dad, as a journalist, had access to that information, and that's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. He realized that they would not get care from the government. And so we moved to Sweden, where we were for 2 years, and then we came to Montreal after that, late 80s. And I grew up in Montreal, and I've been in Alberta and Edmonton for 7 years, where I joined my husband 7 years ago.
Wow. Well, I think that's a lot of people's journeys is I put up a post on Facebook just out of my own imagination. And I just said, tell us how far you are from your hometown. And it was interesting, because, there were so many people that had, were thousands and thousands of miles from their hometown. And I think that that's part of that early part of your career life that you take these big giant leaps and bounds to something new, something different, something scary. And takes a certain amount of courage to do that, a certain amount of maybe naivety or whatever that word is. And as I look back on it, it's like, well, it's one of the scariest parts of my life, but one of the most amazing parts of my life also, that kind of courage, but from a almost a child, looking back, how do you make those kind of decisions? And so I think what happens there is, I'm just kind of putting puzzle pieces together here, is that you have these, there's maybe 4 or 5 like gigantic moments in your life, the gigantic moments that it's either going to go this way or this way. And the decision for me to move away from home came, and I never went back. I never went back. And the reason wasn't certainly because there was a nuclear cloud in the Midwest, but it was a drive. It was something that uprooted me, that changed the course of my life, changed the course of all the people. It's fate. It's one of those fate stories. And so you have one of those. that event brought you to Canada, brought you to meet your husband, brought you to this journey that you're on. And I when we talk about gratitude, I think one of those things is the gratitude for the randomness that happens in our life that we get the chance to act on. And so what we do, and what we're doing even this morning, is we're putting it out there. It's like there are resources for us to guide ourselves along the way, as opposed to, I was talking to a really he's a great friend, and he's a influential regenerative doctor here in Los Angeles last night, and he was basically talking about the people that influence those types of decisions. So I guess that's where I'm coming around to, is that it's not just, if we're on our own, we're generally going to find out the hard way about some certain things. And so he had been mentored for someone for 50 years, and on other critical decisions in his life were really based on that. So I know that there were circumstances for you. Do you have, basically what I'm getting around to, are there heroes that you have that could, you don't have to even name them, but the inspiration is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for giving us clues for people to look for, people to just model after, and be, there's nothing wrong with having heroes. As a matter of fact, I strongly recommend it.
Where to start? I have so many in my life, truly. There's a few that come to mind, and I hope that I give credit to all the people who have had a big impact on me. But there might be a person watching. She's back in Ontario. Her name is Irene, and she's the reason why I'm here in Alberta. She's been really a catalyst, and has been present for me in my life for long stretches of it, from when I was a teenager. She was born in a gulag, so and then she had this amazing life where she ended up in Africa. I think it was, back then it was Tanganyika. I'm not even sure. And so she had a knack for storytelling. She was a really good storyteller and a use of words. And she really believed in me. She encouraged me through those words. And she's the one also who brought me to the conference Poland in the Rockies. It was just this magical 10-day experience. I got to be in Canmore in Alberta in the Majestic Mountains on a full 10-day scholarship with 30 other people just like me who were Polish Canadian. And we had been, most of us had parents who grew up in communist times. And so they brought a very specific mentality to Canada with them. And so we just connected in a way that I had never connected with people before. Like, here I was among these 30 people who understood my idiosyncrasies and understood certain materialism, or maybe a faith in the Catholic Church that our parents had, and that maybe didn't always gel with with Canadian fabric, or kind of even in Quebec where I grew up. And so Irene was this wonderful storyteller, and she helped me with, thanks to her, I founded an online magazine when I was doing my master's. Instead of really focusing on my master's, I focused on this online magazine, and she believed in me every step of the way. Like, the words she used, and she used these grand words. I think she always described me in just always a little slightly higher self than I was in the moment, and so diplomatically too. Like, I look back on my younger self and the drama and just everything, everything was so big and colorful. And when there was joy, it was immense joy, but then the crises felt like big, really dramatic end of life situations. And
Sure.
I mean, she's an older lady, right? She's at a different stage of her life. I gave you clues as to being born in a gulag, when that could have been. So like I'd say maybe 2 generations of a difference. And for a long time, there was a best friend relationship there with me, with somebody who was at a different time, but we connected, and she's been an immense mentor figure for me. She always had this I don't know if I don't know if chutzpah is the right word to use. Maybe I don't understand it correctly, but she had this brightness to her. She didn't take herself too seriously. She always helped me look at the bright side of things, and she was confident, and in a way that maybe you wouldn't necessarily see in our community all the time. She really took pride in Poland's history and highlighted the best characters. Poland often has this tragic history, it's like, it's heavy, it's World War II and it's communism and all the invasions. So we carry that in our souls. And Irene elevated that for me. She made me discover those stories in Africa or in Iran and all the amazing historical characters that we often don't talk about through those stories that you're talking about right today, and the importance of stories. So as you can tell from the way I'm describing her, she's not the only mentor that I've had in my life. I've had more even locally. I have somebody in the higher education world too, who is quite high up in that world. And she's also a very pragmatic person, a mom who is slightly older than me. And she's been in my life for almost 7 years, I guess, or 5 or 6 or 7 years, ever since I moved to Edmonton. And what we had in common is we both did masters in European studies, which feels really, really random in Alberta, right? You think, right? And so she's been a mentor figure for me. And I think the common denominator with these people is that they always called me to be my higher self, and like pushed me further up just enough. Like it was just enough. They took me out of my comfort zone in a very positive way, and weren't scared to ask me the tough questions. And even though we had divergent points of, you know what I mean here, we would thrive in those differences and learn from each other. So I am so grateful, and I have more mentor figures in my life, but they've been a part of my journey all along.
Right. I think sometimes the mentors see something in themselves. It's almost like what you would do if you're a parent. You see something in your child that represents you in a way, and you want yourself to be just that much better than the generation before. And they'll do whatever it takes to make that happen. And they seem like they obviously found something amazing in you that would gravitate to them. They're attracted to you as well as you're attracted to them. I think it's a two-way relationship, a mentorship. In my experience, and that sounds like this is some pretty amazing people that bring you through. I think that also leads to the idea of the community. We were talking before we went on the broadcast this morning, is that we're all here to help each other out. We're all here in the same, not just on the online space, and we get kind of caught up in talking about, talking shop with people and what part of the online space are you, but outside walking around on the street, I've got people in completely different areas of life. But if you just share and what's going on, and without a completely motivational sales approach, which a lot of people kind of think that has to happen. You have to, once you get in an online space or whatever it is, all you do is sell. But you have to have some real life. You've got to have some trusting relationships. You've got to have a little dimension. Our lives are more than 3 dimensions. And that's my kind of commentary about the mentorship. And it's amazing. I mean, I have, there's just in a handful for me that I'm the ones that are still around, I'm still very close to. And it's quite an amazing thing. And at the time, I didn't realize when I first met them that this is a guy who's going to change my life, like literally. And then looking back, it's kind of, I'll stop hogging the show here for a second, but it was like, for me, it was, I had to be a full-on adult living 2,000 miles away before I told my dad that I loved him without, having like a crying fit, because that's the proud part of the men in our side of the family. We were proud, too proud to say things like that. But then looking back on the mentors, you go, wow, that person did influence my life. And I think once you realize that, then we can become mentors. I think if we, for me, I had to recognize that mentorship in order for me to be one. And why don't we get down to business? Tell us about how you work with your moms and dads, but mostly the moms right now.
Yeah. So where to start? I'm trying to go down to the essentials. Well, we create community. First of all, we create community, a loving, intellectual, supportive community. Yesterday, I had the chance to talk with many of them in a closed call and to really get a sense of how this community is impacting them. And it's building relationships between moms who often feel so isolated and alone and misunderstood. So when they come into our community, they say, like, I tried being in different spaces with other moms, but I just couldn't relate because I really love my career and I felt judged for that. And so they come into Pros and Babes and then they find all these other moms like them who value their career. And all of a sudden, there's no drama, there's no judgment, and then they know they can become really close and support each other. And so we create this, now I kind of understand that the concept of mastermind. I never used that to describe my group, but they create something bigger than just the individuals. And they know, yesterday they were saying, you know what, even if I haven't met most of you physically because of COVID, I know I can text you and I know that you are going to have my back and you're going to help me right away. And I think it's the creation of those moments. I think that's the most precious part, because Keith, you're saying that one decision can change our life dramatically, right? And so sometimes it's that one text message, that one piece of advice, that one person who was there with you when you felt like you were in darkness and in crisis. They were there and they give you that glimmer of hope that pushed you to take the right path and not the left path. Right? And there's a path that can take you to more joy. And so that's what, fundamentally, it's about that community, and that is nurtured, of course, around specific themes and pillars. So if you're talking about the program structure, we're talking about support systems, career life integration, a relationship with your spouse. As you know, when you have a baby, that changes dramatically and you can drift from each other. We talk a lot about that, on how to reconnect, realign. Women get really resentful of their husbands. We can spend a lot of time ranting and venting and complaining. But if you realign your thinking and you start noticing how much your partner actually does and give them the chance to be all they can be as a father, magic can happen in a relationship. So that is a big aha moment often in women in our community, when they stop getting in that mindset where they're resentful of their partner, but they start seeing and being grateful for the relationship they have, magic happens. So those are just a few of the topics we explore, but ultimately it's a very intellectual, loving community of women who come to learn together, who come to reflect, journal, do a very specific curriculum to grow and to get unstuck from whatever patterns are keeping them disappointed, anxious, stuck in drama, stuck in their career path, stuck as a working mom who's not sure whether she wants to stay in the same job but still wants to work. They come together, they find the answers, they find the clues. Sometimes even when I'm not in the room, behind the scenes, they get together and they solve problems and they build better lives.
Right. I wanted to interject something when you were talking about the person who might just get that one text that could, in fact, switch, is that it feels to me like you're building this warm community. It takes a little while. It takes a little while for people who might be hardened from life in whatever way it is, because, like you were talking about those moments, or the people that are stuck. I think a lot of times people get stuck because they feel that their fate has been sealed. And it's like, this is my life. This is my path, predetermined, and I'm just going to slog through it. But it seems like you've created this moment of trust, this moment of warmness, this moment of welcomeness, and without pressure, those texts can come in and be received as a willing participant, as opposed to an intervention happening on me. If I'm not ready for it, somebody just says, you need this, you really need, if I walk down the street, I find tons of people that need my program. But if I run up to them and tell them what's wrong with them and why they need my program, that does not work. They run as fast as and that's kind of the truth. A lot of people try that method, but I just wanted to point out that it seems to me that you need to do a little bit of work with your group, but it's you welcome them in, and that moment when they can trust that text coming in to be honest is huge. I just wanted to point that out because I know that there's a lot of ice breaking that needs to happen before someone can even trust that it might even be the most beautiful message. But if they read between the lines, you know how people in this day and age, they look at the text and they go, how could they say that? And it's like, if you read it with a neutral voice, it's more like, it seems pretty generic to me. There isn't the attitude that you're building into it. And that, that's part of our kind of toxic information world that we live in at this point. We can project whatever we want to project on the written word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to, I could feel myself in that position of both ways, of getting the text when I'm not ready for it and discarding it because someone's invading my space or whatever it is. But then I feel you when that person can go, oh, somebody actually took the time to reach out to me. And it's a human experience to build trust. It's really an amazing thing. Congratulations doing that.
Thank you. You are right. It really does take time to build trust, because when I think of the people who end up joining our community, sometimes they've heard from me 3 years ago, and they've observed from behind the scenes, and they've observed maybe my character and what I do before they take that leap of faith to join the community and trust that, yes, we can bring them something to build the new them. Does my message alienate some people? I'd say, and it's been part of the growing pains of staying faithful and determined to this mission that I've discerned this calling to help working moms. Because I've been, it takes a long time. You plant a seed and then you try to grow, but there are obviously obstacles along the way. I gave you the shortened version of
Sure.
Oh yeah, I started, this organization and now it's this big thing. But everything in the middle, and even right now, I got pregnant a second time. I did this while juggling a corporate job. I did this while subsidizing, right? Like in the beginning, you're just pouring your heart and soul and your money into things without any returns. And I had my own bouts of chaos and anxiety, and definitely receiving messages, people kind of knocking on my door and not being ready for their message. So I know that this message doesn't land with everybody, and it doesn't land right at the right time, always at the right time. And I'm thinking, we just spent a few days doing a workshop with my team with a message that we were, I think, carrying from the summer. And it takes time to refine and cultivate. And what I'm feeling right now, as we're locking down in Alberta to some extent, is that I'm feeling a lot of fear and anxiety and pain. And I've been lucky because we've been nurturing really a loving cocoon in my house. My husband and I have worked very hard on our relationship, right? And I've talked about it publicly, and yes, too. I mean, I've done preventative couples therapy because I work long hours. Like I work 50, 60, 70 hours sometimes, and he's the lead caregiver for our children. And it melts my heart to see. He's such an amazing dad, but we also had to create the space for that to happen, right? So me working more gives him the space to be this amazing father, and I see him week by week growing into that role, growing as a husband. And so at some point when we decided together that I would focus on my business, we sat down and we thought, like, how are we going to manage this without eroding our marriage? And so we called the couples therapist preventatively, because we were not at a crisis point. But we were anticipating that if we don't nurture the communication and don't seize even those 5 minutes to connect once in a while, then we know what happens when entrepreneurs work, and neglect family. And I, out of integrity, need to build my business while building a loving family. That is not something I can sacrifice in the long term. We know that in the short term, we might make trade-offs. Like last weekend, because we're running this workshop, and I might tear up by saying that, but my husband took our kids to his dad's cabin. And so my boys are so amazing. I love them to bits. They're such amazing humans. And my son asked, "Mommy, are you coming with us?" And I said, "No, I'm not coming with you. I'm working." And it was really hard in that moment to say that to him, because they're such fantastic little dudes. and I learned so much from them. But in that moment, I knew that I have a calling to others as well. I love my sons, and I'm so intentional about how I spend time with them. And so, my husband has been the most amazing hero in this journey because he understands my calling. We've discerned it together. And he's just this amazing, loving presence and support. And it's not like it's always been, I mean, he's a pretty exceptional man, but it's not like we never thought about this or had crises. And I want other moms to know that that is possible for them, right? That they can have a career and a loving marriage and beautiful kids. If that is what they really, really want, and they sit down to think about what that looks in practice, they don't have to play necessarily by the conventional rules all the time. So as I looked at my son, and he, my husband sometimes asks my son, like, sing a song about mommy. So, and daddy. So he would sing like, daddy makes the best pancakes and he cooks super good food. And then he sang, Mammy works at the computer. And it was just so interesting to hear that. But one night as I was rocking him, and I asked him, what do you love about your brother? What do you love about daddy? What do you love about mommy? And he said, mommy, you work really hard at the computer. And then he's like, but you work hard for the family. And that just made me weep. And we're making sure to make that connection to our children, that even if they see me working a lot for a calling, I have a values board. My values are faith, love, and accountability. And, they understand, I think he understands that on a deeper level, that my work has meaning. It's not just work to make money. It's not just work for the motions. And I see my son understands that, and he respects that. And it makes it all worthwhile. But it took us years to build that. Like, we envisioned that, right? We put pictures and we wrote down that this is what's going to be important to us, that even though if we work hard as two professionals, it's not going to be at the expense of our family. And that means we say no to a lot of things. We're very simple people at the end of the day. We value nature. We value healthy food. We value time in front of the fire together. We don't have tons of fancy gadgets. We don't have the latest, stuff. We don't shop tons, but we know what we value, and that is so special for us. And I know that's available to anybody who decides to be intentional about being a working parent. And that's what I want everybody to hear. Truly, it's available to you if you decide that's what you want.
Right. That's fantastic. I could have, I should have ran into you 20 something years ago and might have saved some trouble in my path. As there is this sort of like provider label that you put on yourself. Sometimes it's generational. It's like, you do this, you provide for your family at all costs, no matter what. And I think what you said about the preventative maintenance on your relationship with your husband is, I think that's like chapter 1 in terms of how that can be, the discussions that happen, because it gets so isolating. Your computer is around the house. I'm guessing your office is near your house. I could be wrong about that. But,
inside my house.
But when it's not in the house, and you don't see daddy around or mommy around, the kids, I guess the whole point of Pros and Babes is that it can be one happy family with, everybody's got to be on the same page. If everyone's on the same page, that's everything. If you go to work and you're working 100-hour week, which I can relate to, 70 hours, I can, it's that kind of thing. You leave before the sun comes up and you come home after the kids go to bed. There's not a lot of potential in that unless there's a solid foundation, and it'll inevitably fall to pieces. That's, the wheels will come off, and that's kind of a statistical fact. So it's an amazing the preventative maintenance is huge. The idea that you are so emotionally attached, and that you that your kids, that's, I think, one of the things that I think in this, the perception that kids don't get it is so wrong, because they get it even if it's very simple and that they can describe it, and they pick up on things that you just wouldn't think they'd ever even know what was going on. So I experienced that with both of my kids, and we're going, well, although they won't remember that part, and it's like, oh, they sure do. They certainly do. I will say this is that it's never too late. I believe. I think that's what you're proposing to people. And I've seen that experience. Even if you have had some trouble, and you can, this is just basically, it's never too late. It was interesting. My daughter just graduated from college. This is last week. It's an early graduation ceremony because of the COVID and everything. And she's so into sports media in her major and her career wishes, which is something that, in my world, long before I could have an intellectual conversation with her about things like that, it was so distant to me. Being at work was me going away and going to work. And what I did was sort of like, I don't even know if they follow it, but it's interesting that she has found this path that's strikingly similar to mine. I don't know what the point of me saying that is that they do have perceptions. They are, no matter what, they are our children, and you are their parents, and so there's just such value and such human connection. We're all humans, like you say, and it's pretty fascinating. I think you're doing a great job, Kinia, and I think I can see it in your smile. I can see it in your emotional attachment to your son's question. That's awesome. It's hard to know what to say after that story. It's really great. So let's just segue into this. Pros and Babes is your movement, is your group, it's your community. Give us a little. It doesn't have to be formal pitch, but I want to put together a way to find you, the easiest way to find you, and this conversation will resonate with anybody who's trying to put together a family and a career. And so give us a little pitch here.
Sure. So the easiest ways to find us would be on prosandbabes.com, with however and spelled in full letters. So pros and babes, not with the ampersand, prosandbabes.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. We have a Facebook group if you research Pros and Babes as well. This is where we share a lot of resources, conversations, inspiration on a weekly basis. Just like you, we do a live show with guests so that we can help moms feel not so alone. So that's where they would find us, essentially. That's
awesome. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time out on a busy day before. Well, you don't have Thanksgiving up, and is tomorrow normal day? I don't want to.
We had Canadian Thanksgiving a couple of weeks ago. I believe it was I think it was in October.
Right. Yeah. So is this a regular work week for Canada?
It is a regular work week for Canada. I'd say, though, it's not regular for Alberta because things are changing, right? There's a lockdown, and so lots of things are changing. So I'm probably going to be tuning in on how that is affecting my family. I know that my husband, who's a teacher, will start teaching from home again in some time. So things are changing here.
Right. Well, Kinia Romanowska, I thank you so much for coming on the $1 Million Story series. I was looking forward to it, and I could tell there's this great picture that you'll see on the post for this broadcast of Kinia and your two kids. It's two, right?
Two. Yes.
Yeah, and the smiles on everybody's face and the crazy looks on the kids' face is just an amazing picture. I can tell. I know why you chose that picture. It says it all. It's really great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your talents and your dedication to being a story digger and sharing people's whys in this world.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about for me. All right, thanks again, Kinia. We'll see you around. We'll talk. We're connected. So thanks again. My name is Keith Salmon, and I'm the CEO of Keith Salmon Coaching, where we work on your story. We make your $1 million story profitable to believe it or not. So I'd encourage you to join my Facebook group. It's called the $1 Million Story Ninjas, and that's what I do in there. I'm always teaching what I know about my many years in the film and advertising and business and the human connection. I was a film editor for many years, and I turned into a director when that human connection of telling unscripted stories and getting people to say things they wouldn't otherwise say about themselves, the pivotal things all about connection. And so I encourage you to join that group. And until the next episode, I wish you well. And if you're in the U.S., have a great Thanksgiving, and all over the world, just be safe. And we'll see you real soon. And thanks so much. My name is Keith Salmon, the $1 Million Story Series. Thanks.